is Rachel from Mini Ministry, coming to you on another beautiful God-given day. And I've been studying in my personal Bible time with the Lord, and I'm studying right now the life of David in the book of 1 Samuel. We all know that David is known as a man after God's own heart, that he is the one who was chosen from a very young age. You recall that when all his other brothers came in to be seen, and but he kept asking, where's the other one? He goes, well, there's one kid still in the field, but they didn't think much of it because he was young. But he was the one who God had chosen. God saw his heart and what he could do. We know David is the man who killed the great giant Goliath in a moment of awesome victory. And we know him as a man after God's own heart. He becomes a great king, and the one with whom, through the line, the Messiah will come. All great things. But I've noticed that there's a lot of things that we missed, and today in my study, something really stuck out to me that I thought was really helpful for us to think upon and to take into consideration. So David becomes very important. He is known throughout the lands as being a great marksman, as for being a good leader. Him and Jonathan become best of friends, and Jonathan is Saul's son, Saul, who is currently king at the time, and they become best of friends. Well, throughout this time, Saul becomes very jealous of David. He wants what David has. David has this glory, and people love him, and Jonathan loves him, and he gets very, very jealous to the point that he decides he's going to kill David. Now, that's taking jealousy really, really far, in my opinion. If I'm jealous of somebody, I'm not going to go kill them. I might stew about it, but I'm not going to go kill them. But Saul felt that that was the best course of action. He probably thought in his mentality that if I kill David, I will then be the great, and people will fawn over me. And it was really pride that was causing him to hate David to the point of wanting to kill him, because he wanted to be the greatest. He wanted to be the best. And even though Saul early on was really trying to follow the Lord, David calmed him when he played the harp, things like that. In the end, he couldn't get over his pride. So he goes down to hunt David. There are multiple instances where he throws a spear at David to try to kill him. And then David goes to Jonathan and says, your father is trying to kill me. Jonathan's like, my father would never do that. He's like, I assure you. And then Jonathan really finds out the truth that, yes, Saul in fact does want David dead. And Jonathan just can't bear it, because Jonathan and David truly love each other. David and Jonathan is the best show of friendship in the Bible. It's absolutely beautiful. Take time to read it. So David takes off and flees so that he is not found by Saul. And you go through, I was reading through like chapters 20 through 23 today, 24, and goes through of how David hides from Saul. He goes to different mountain ranges. He goes through different caves, different parts of the wilderness, trying to hide from Saul. He wants to escape. He wants to save his life. I don't think anybody wants to be killed. Let alone David, who just feels like it's completely unfair. So he's trying to escape, and Saul keeps garnering up his army more and more just to try to track down David, just to kill this one man. He puts all his army and all his efforts into it to kill one guy. Really pretty powerful what pride can do to you. But then this really amazing moment happens, and I've read this many times biblically, but it just really astounded me today. And so there comes a point where Saul had retreated, gone back because the Philistines were invading Israel, so he goes back to help. Then he decides to take 3,000 more men to go. He finds out where David is. He's going to go kill him. So they go in. Well, ironically enough, what's about to happen is truly, I think, something we all need to learn from. So after Saul arrived from fighting the Philistines, I'm reading down in my Bible too accurate. I'm reading from the New Living Translation, by the way, of the Bible. Saul chose 3,000 special troops throughout to go search for David. Saul then goes into a cave, and my translation says to relieve himself. So he basically had to take a potty break is what happened. So he's walking along. They're looking for David, and he's like, I gotta go pee. So he goes into a cave to relieve himself. And it just so happens that the cave that he chose to go potty into is the cave where David and his men are hiding. Now, this is the hilarity of the moment that he's going to relieve himself. Kind of like, if you're ever driving, you stop off on the side of the road to go to the bathroom, it happens. But what's amazing is what happened next, is that David's men looked and said, "Now is your opportunity. Today's the day that the Lord was talking about. I will put Saul into your power to do with as you wish." Then David crept forward and cut off a piece of his robe. Notice that David does not creep forward and kill him. Notice that David does not scare him and attack him. David crept forward and cut off a piece of his robe. And the very next line says, "But then David's conscience began to bother him because he had cut Saul's robe." So David, even though he knew that Saul would kill him if given the chance, he knew his life was in danger, and yet he still just felt pricked. The Lord was pricking his conscience, saying, okay, does that make it right for you to kill this man necessarily? Okay? His conscience was bothering him. He felt bad just for taking off a piece of Saul's robe. Now, granted, he didn't endanger Saul. He did not hurt Saul, but he cut off a piece of his robe. If you look back throughout the history of the Bible so this far, a robe is a very important symbol for a king, for a priest, for anybody. It's very important. Royal robes kind of thing. It's like you wearing your best outfit and somebody coming up and slicing off a piece of my pretty dress or a piece of your suit. It would just be offensive. So it's kind of like that. But he did not let his men kill Saul, and David himself did not kill him. And later we go down a little bit, and he actually goes to Saul and he says, "Here I am. I was in that cave. I had every opportunity to kill you. And instead, all I did was take this little piece off of your robe, of your garment. And I could have killed you, and you would not have known the difference." And I'm pretty sure from what we've read so far from the life of David that for the most part, a lot of people would not have been mad at David because a lot of people were aware that he was, trying to kill David. Saul was out to get David. Even Jonathan knew. And so a lot of people I don't think would have been mad at David for killing Saul. And yet God used David to teach us a great lesson of ultimate forgiveness here. David, in his own right, in every human aspect term of it, had every right to kill Saul in this moment. Saul was after him. Saul wanted to kill him. And yet, David doesn't do it. And the Bible tells us, he doesn't allow his men to kill Saul. Because deep down, he sees Saul probably somewhat as a father figure. And he has a love for him. He also knows that he is the anointed one. He's going to be king someday. And he's supposed to do something great for the Lord. All these emotions raveled up into this moment that he takes this piece of garment to Saul and says, "I could have killed you, but instead I simply took off a piece of your robe. I could have done evil to you." But as it tells us, the old proverb says, "From evil people come evil deeds, but surely I chose to do good." Okay? We have an option. Even though we have a choice to do evil, we can choose to do good. David had a choice in that moment. He could have gone with what his men were telling him to do and what his human natural instinct probably was. Your natural instinct, if somebody's trying to kill you, is to defend yourself, to not have this persecution. But David in that moment chose, to some degree, forgiveness. He chose not to go with his human instinct, and he let his faith overcome his human desire. All too often, I think we as people, we let our human desires overcome what our faith tells us to do. We want our way and not God's way. We want what we want. It tends to be our way or the highway. And unfortunately, that's where we get into pride and hatred and violence and anger and things that God detests because we want our way and not God's way. Burger King, years ago, had a slogan. I think it's still technically their slogan, but you don't hear it as much. But it was always plastered across their billboards and across every commercial they ever made. And it says, "Have it your way," meaning you could go in and you can ask for your Whopper any way you like it and they'd make it. You can have it however you like, which is great for food. But the problem is that slogan, in essence, has carried on into human existence. We want it our way. We want what we want, and we want it now. We don't have the patience to wait anymore. And that gets us into so much trouble, especially when it comes to things of the Lord. And we have to stop, and we need to really think about how God wants us to act and to react to things. David chose to react in a most awesome way. Yeah, he still cut off the piece of that robe, but it says that his conscience pricked him and he felt sorrowful. He felt bad for what he had done because he knew what the robe meant. But at the same time, he did not kill Saul. He still chose faith over fear. He chose faith over the moment and trusted that God knew more than he did. We know that later on in David's life, he does a lot of things that are questionable, but I think overall, being a man after God's own heart says a lot for the life of David and for who David is. I want to challenge all of you, as well as myself, to let faith be the bigger step. Instead of choosing my way, instead of choosing your way, instead of choosing what you want all the time, can we stop and think about what God would want, about how God would want us to act and react? Years ago, we had bracelets and things that said, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And that is still a prevalent thought today. So, my friends, when you are driving in your car and somebody cuts you off or does something unkind or says something unkind, choose to react in a godly way. When you see somebody in the grocery store and does something, choose to act in a godly way. We are given choices every day, moment in and moment out, to truly be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. And it's not always by proclaiming the gospel. It is by choosing to live our lives in a godly manner. It is by choosing the correct actions and reactions that most people are going to actually question what it is that we believe in, who we believe in. That, my friends, is the beginning of the gospel. Living as Christ lived. Being part of that. Being the hands and feet of Jesus. Literally. So I want to encourage you today to let faith be your stronghold. Choose forgiveness. Choose faith. Choose love. And just remember that the great life of David is another understanding of just how God shows us little moments of how we need to be, even through trials and tribulations that we were faced with. Hope you all found that encouraging. I encourage you to pick up the Bible and read the life of David. Especially this was in 1 Samuel today, especially chapter 24 was the big highlight. But I encourage you to read it for yourself, pray about it, and see what God has in store for you and your life. Hope you all have a blessed day. Until next time.